It is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. Heather, a lot of news. I mean, this was a big week for Democrats. This is the beginning of the big new beginning.
It is. I am pumped. Let's get into it. Let's cover the DNC, obviously. Let's talk about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. We'll have to talk about Trump. I'm sorry, everybody. And also RFK Jr.'s announcement.
Well, I was not surprised. I don't know if you were. RFK was running out of money. A lot of people are still fans of his because of his father, because they confused Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with Robert F. Kennedy Sr. There could be no further difference. I mean, they are totally different. I worked for Robert F. Kennedy Sr., and he was a man who really cared about the people, cared about working people. RFK Jr. is a crank. He's a crackpot. And he has now shown that by throwing his weight behind Donald Trump, who's the biggest crackpot of all.
I know. And a number of his family members have come out and said, we disagree with this. We're behind Harris Walz. But what will his voters, what will his supporters do? Are they going to hop on over?
I hope they don't. I mean, I hope the supporters understand who this man is. Now, obviously, if they were Trump supporters from the beginning, it's not going to make much difference. But look at this is still going to be a very tight election, notwithstanding all the ebullience and excitement and everything that came out of the Democratic convention. Let's not fool ourselves. The election in 2020 and the election in 2016, both of them turned on something like 40 to 50,000 votes in 5 states. So this is going to be, again, an incredibly tight election.
Yeah.
We have got to work very, very hard.
Yep. And the Electoral College is part of that. Can we just take a minute to I know we have to be realists and there is a big fight ahead, but this Democratic National Convention was fantastic. I mean, I enjoyed almost every minute.
Well, I did too.
I
thought it was, I've seen a lot of conventions.
You've been to them.
I've been to them. I've actually spoken at them. I mean, I go back to Dukakis in 1988. Conventions tend to be, they are infomercials, giant infomercials for a party. They don't do what conventions used to do, and that is there is not a fight over or even competition over who is going to be nominated. Everything that's done all beforehand, because everybody remembers how crazy an open convention was in 1968, the last open convention. So it's an infomercial. But the question is, can you do an infomercial in a way that is exciting and upbeat, that introduces the candidates in ways that people find enjoyable? And I think that this was a almost perfect convention in that regard.
I thought it was fantastic. I think whoever directed the thing, they started it, people went low so that she could go high. The culminating speech was incredible. I think one of the key goals of this is for us to understand who Kamala Harris is. It was an introduction. It was a proof of concept. We all knew. She's this combination of an incumbent because she's been around the current administration, but then she's got this outsider energy that's so exciting. And I think she nailed that speech yesterday. I think it had an undercurrent of joy, but an incredible amount of seriousness and personality and prosecutorial strength. And I was just really dug it.
I really did too. Thursday. You're talking about the Thursday speech.
Sorry, yes.
I also thought that she showed, and this is something that people don't pay a great deal of attention to, but she really chose the people who picked Tim Walz and who directed the convention and who got her the nomination and made sure that everything was done well, and even dealt with what could have been a disaster, and that is the issue of the Palestinians and the rift in the party. I'm very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, but in terms of what she needed to do for the purpose of the convention, her decisions were extraordinarily good. And Heather, the point I want to make is that a president is understood and has to be understood by the decisions that president makes and is capable of making. A presidential campaign is a kind of rehearsal, a microcosm of what an administration could be. And Kamala Harris has done it remarkably well.
Right. And also, it was so interesting to me because it felt so personal. And it felt like we got to know these people in a way that I was surprised about, including compared to past conventions. I mean, the use of video was incredible, but seeing who, I don't know, so many family members and also the range of speaker. There were Republicans, there were former Trump staffers, and compared to the RNC, which was really just the TNC, because it was the Trump National Convention, who had so few lauded politicians. It had entertainers and business people and not the former vice president.
And wrestlers and bodybuilders. The Trump convention really was all about Trump. That is the Republican Party today. It's not about policy. It's not about families. It's not about democracy. It's not about changing America. It's about basically the cult of the celebration of one man, and that is Donald Trump, giving him full authority, full power. And I think that the Democratic Convention showed the difference, because the Democratic Convention was about families. It was about what we want for the future. It was what we want for our children. It was not a cult at all about anybody, although Kamala Harris and Tim Walz both did extraordinarily well.
They did. And it was, so again, the goals are, who is Kamala Harris? We need to get to know her. Could we envision her as president? My answer is definitely yes, granted a little biased. She took the mantle. That was part of it, right? This passing of the torch, this appreciating, thanking, gratitude for President Biden, which he deserves on so many levels. And then kind of redefining, I think, some new themes, right? So some of the things that I took away from this is reproductive freedom. I mean, of course, we knew this would happen. And that term is so interesting, right? I studied public health and worked in global health. We did not use that term. It is now more popular, including because we're not just talking about abortion. We're talking about contraception in 2024. We're talking about IVF. So there were kind of specific takeaways we wanted. But then this bigger picture, and I read this in The Bulwark, but she didn't use the word Democrat or the Democratic Party. She was really trying to appeal to all Americans, and it felt very authentic.
It did feel that, and authenticity is really the key here, because the themes of freedom and family and patriotism are well-rehearsed themes in the Democratic Party and even the Republican Party. But to give them the backing, the authenticity of these people, the people who were not only Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, but also all of the other people who came and spoke, it was very uplifting. And they managed to maintain that uplifting quality at the same time that they were sketching the danger of Donald Trump, the reason that we need to see him as the threat he is. And to pull that off, Heather, that both sides, it's kind of a split screen, both the positive, hopeful energy and at the same time the fear and anger and threat of Donald Trump is quite an achievement. And I think people left the convention feeling that kind of energy. It was energy and momentum are the keys.
Yeah. And I mean, her phrasing of he is an unserious man and there will be serious consequences to him getting back in the White House was a really powerful and powerfully delivered sentence.
Unserious man. You know, I heard that. And what she's doing is making him smaller and smaller and smaller. And that makes sense. But the only reservation I have, honestly, is that he represents an existential threat to the United States. I mean, he is the first president to mount essentially an attempted coup on America. He told his followers to attack the Capitol. He tried to get electors to change their votes and also state delegations. And he's doing it right now. He's doing it again. We know that. We know it from a lot of evidence we've got from Arizona and elsewhere. And this is not something that is just, this is treachery. He is a traitor to the United States. So I can understand, the advantage of Democrats and Kamala Harris kind of making him smaller and smaller, but he is a huge threat. And let's not forget that.
No, but this too, video was incredibly powerful at this event. Again, how it was produced over the however many days it was last week. I mean, we have videos that Doug Emhoff's kid did, his son did of him that felt like personal, it felt more like a 50th birthday party or a I don't know, a wedding or something, getting to know these people intimately, but also that you and I know this because we make videos, in our day jobs, but basically telling people there's an existential threat and getting people to understand that is really difficult.
It is very, very,
and
very,
so
very hard.
showing those January 6th riots over and over again is critically important for our lizard brains to get it. And I think they did that incredibly well, too.
Now, there's another split screen that they did well, but it's going to be hard to sustain. And that is Kamala Harris is saying, I am a new beginning. I am not part of the old Democratic Party or even part of the Biden administration, but I am. I am building on the foundation laid by the Biden administration. Now, what Trump and the Republicans are trying to do is say, well, she can't get away from the Biden administration. She was part of it, and everything the Biden administration failed to do is on her as well. Now, that's a delicate balancing act for her and for the Democrats to say, new beginning, but I'm also adopting everything that the Biden wanted to achieve and did achieve. It's going to be interesting to see what she does. And this is a very compressed schedule. As you know, Heather, 17 days from now is the debate, the presidential debate. Everybody is going to be, I hope everybody's going to be watching. It's going to be as big or a bigger deal than the first presidential debate with Biden and Trump. And then in 72 days, we have the election. I mean, this is, I'm used to a kind of a process that is not accelerated to this degree. So this is very, very complicated work for the Democrats.
That's it.
To organize themselves, and for everybody's watching. I want to just say to all of you out there, I hope you understand. Of course you do. That this is not, and politics is not a spectator sport. That we need you to be out there mobilizing, energizing, getting people involved, making sure that anybody you know in one of the swing states, any relative you know in one of the swing states is actually actively involved. Also in the state of, for example, our state here in California, or in New York State, enclaves that are blue enclaves. There are key races at the congressional level that really have got to be won by Democrats, and in order for the House to return to control by Democrats. Critically important.
Right.
All of you out there have a role to play.
And she said that as well. I think she looked at the camera a lot. She didn't mention Biden very many times in her speech. She launched with him and said, thank you. And she had, I would say, sufficient and genuine gratitude. But I think she just nailed it. And I think Tim Walz has been a terrific choice. And getting to know him at this convention and how folksy he is. Did you see him run up to her after the speech and say, "Holy smokes"? I mean, I read his lips.
It's all folksy. I mean, did you see the meme about dancing the Kamala Walz? 2 steps forward, no step back.
No,
Two
but
steps forward, no step.
Right, but then I saw the ones of his kids giving him bunny ears on national TV, and then his terrific son who was so elated and said, "That's my dad." And then the right made fun of him because he was so energetic and authentic with his feelings, God forbid, and
Well, let the right make fun of him. I mean, see, that's the point. When the right wing officials and Trumpers, when they are using ridicule and really putting people down, that is the opposite of what the Democrats and what Kamala Harris was, pulling people up. Yes, there was putting Trump down, but that's different from putting down half of America.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think, so you've said too, there haven't been enough policy details. She hasn't gotten in the weeds. What is her plan? That kind of thing. And there needs to be more revealed, obviously, but you just mentioned this crunch timing. I mean, the normal arc of these things is not what we're dealing with. So phase 1 has been, who is she? Can you picture her as president? Who's Tim Walz? How are they going to do together? Getting to know her. Foreign policy, she's not famous for, so we have to have an understanding of what her processes are going to be and what her thoughts are. But in terms of price gouging, I mean, we've heard a few things about policy, but will there be more? I mean, obviously there have to be. What about the timing?
I am a policy nerd. I teach public policy.
Old news.
And I love policy, but I think that she's right to avoid a lot of policy detail. Because if the Democrats' mistake every time, every election, is to put out detailed policies. I think Hillary Clinton had 200 policy details. When you put that much policy detail out, you're exposing yourself to a lot of picking and criticism and misunderstanding, and you're never going to. No president actually accomplishes the details that they set out. What a president wants to do is put out broad ideas. And Heather, the same thing with press conferences. She's being criticized by Trump and others for not having a press conference. Well, I love press conferences. I think they're important, but I understand why she's not doing it. Because if you have a press conference and you say the wrong thing or you answer a question in the wrong way, bingo, that's all the press is going to focus on. That's the gotcha mentality of the press. The longer she can avoid detailed policies or even press conferences, I think in terms of her goals, the better for her.
But also, I love this. Oh, she's not having people over to her living room at Mar-a-Lago because that's so compelling, his rambling press conference. She has been on the road. How she has the stamina she does or any of these politicians do. I run too many errands in a day and have to take the next day off. I mean, it's incredible. She was doing an additional rally while the convention was going on in the stadium that Trump tried to fill in Milwaukee. I mean, come on. And I mean, the subtle trolling is so terrific.
And the energy level you just pointed out, I think when she says it's a new beginning and when she separates herself from the Biden administration, she doesn't have to do it more than just show the level of energy she has and the enthusiasm she's bringing to the job and the possibilities ahead. That's new. We haven't seen that level of energy, that level of enthusiasm, that degree of momentum since what? I have a hard time remembering.
Let's remember too the other title for the job, Commander-in-Chief. I'm sorry, which one? I'm looking at Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. I feel like I owe Kamala Harris an apology too, because she's been here the whole time. We've seen the clips of her over time. When she was vice president, I kind of thought, I don't know where she is that much. I didn't question that she was doing things. I just found it interesting that she wasn't really coming to the fore of the New York Times and other things. But I mean, she is so obviously accomplished, but ready for this. And providing that, I mean, granted, not everyone in the world watched this, right? It's a lot of preaching to the choir. We know that, but also we're hoping Adam Kinzinger, other people have gotten to Kamala Harris herself, to other persuadables, right? And people who are on the fence.
Well, she did give, on that commander-in-chief issue, not only in the speech she gave, but she also evinced a kind of a powerful presence, a strength that is not something that we all assumed about her. I mean, a vice president is a very, very difficult job. It's vice presidents, as far back as I remember, have always complained about the job. And she was not very well known. She was not very well liked. There was a lot of criticism of her. And in the past, the most astounding thing is that almost the minute that Biden dropped out and she took up the reins, we saw a different person. And that different person, Thursday night, really did fill the arena, and it filled millions of television screens with somebody who was commanding,
right?
Somebody who was strong and able, somebody who understood the world in a way that we never understood her. And I think it's going to make it's going to make the election far more difficult for Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't know what to do. He's obviously just out of his gourd. I mean, he was out of his gourd before, but you can see he's speaking now to smaller audiences. He is off script. He's calling her a communist. He's saying she's not very good looking. He's picking on her wardrobe. He's doing things that have nothing to do with anything. And hopefully many of the uncommitteds or people who are wavering or independent voters who are going to be so critical in the swing states,
Right.
so critical to this election, they are seeing the contrast. And it's
Right.
huge.
Right. I have to push back because I don't know if she's a different person or if she's realized her potential that was always there and she's playing the role that she could always play, but she was playing a different role before. So I think it's kind of coming to fruition, but it was obviously always there.
It had to have been there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that we didn't see it.
That's it.
Now again, we didn't see it. We don't see it in any vice president. I mean, I remember
Right.
when Al Gore moved from vice president to being a presidential candidate. That too, it was kind of astounding. It wasn't as dramatic
Yeah.
as Kamala Harris, but it's a different frame.
Right. But what about Trump? So he's not getting his attention fixes. I mean, what's he going to do? He's not going to go underground. He doesn't even know. The only thing that knows underground around him are the gophers in his golf courses, and he's not handling those.
No, but he's going to go underground to the extent that I believe, tragically, he's trying to put his loyalists in counties where in swing states the vote is going to be very, very critical, so that they will be in charge of deciding such things as which mail-in ballots count and which election workers are going to be protected, and how the count is going to actually be undertaken, and ultimately the certification of the count.
Yeah.
And this is a huge problem, Heather. I don't know, and we have no good information on the extent to which he is doing this and his underlings are doing it, but it may be that he's counting on this throwing the election to him by election day. It's another example of the treachery of Donald Trump.
Right. And you've written about this on your Substack this week. There's a lot of content on your Substack for those who aren't getting it. But we'll have to see what he does. So the next debate, which, by the way, on our calendars this is how crunched this timeline is. This is what it still said Biden, Trump debate on our Google Calendar until 2 days ago.
Google Calendar.
Yeah, exactly. And so our Google Calendar.
Let's be clear. It's September 10th. It's 17 days from now, and it's. I think if I were making predictions, I think she would eat him for lunch. I mean, I think she is.
I love it.
She is such a powerful prosecutor, and that's what he cannot stand. He also can't stand a powerful woman, and he can't stand a woman of color. But also a prosecutor gets actually under his skin.
It's going to be so great. And you and I will watch the debate together, God help us, because we've done that before. It was not easy, that first.
And all of you out there, we will be with you. You told us how much we helped you through the last debate, presidential debate. That was really hard. Well, this one should be a much more enjoyable experience.
I think so. I mean, still tense, and we'll do the fact checking. And thank you to Michael on our team who suggested that we try it based on everyone's input. So let's do it again.
Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So let's also talk about, so we've talked about Trump. How about, you mentioned a little bit, but RFK Jr., I mean, one thing leaving the DNC and having that in the past, I'm really excited to see the new polls around undecideds and persuadables as it relates to Kamala Harris, but also as it relates to Trump now that RFK is rolling into that, part of the ticket. Anything else?
I don't think it's going to help Trump. I really think that people are beginning to see or they've already decided that RFK is a crackpot, as I said before, and you can quote me on that. I think that Trump is the kind of person who attracts, the Elon Musks of the world. There are a lot of followers. Elon Musk is not running for election, obviously, but he has a lot of people who think he's great. But he also is a personal and authoritarian, if not neo-fascist personality. And those are the people who are attracted to Trump. And we have to. I mean, the stakes are simply huge. This is an existential question for American democracy. Let's not forget it.
Right. Now, it wouldn't be one of our coffee clutches if we didn't talk about the economy. And the news of the week was Jerome Powell came out the other day and said we might have to make a policy change. So he is signaling. What is he signaling? Tell us. And what's it going to be?
Yesterday in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, at the Fed's annual conclave, he did all but say, he didn't actually quote say, but he all but said that at the September meeting, the Fed is going to reduce the prime rate from 5.3, maybe a quarter point, maybe a half a point, he didn't say, but there's no question that given the recent employment numbers we've got, we'll have much more information very, very soon, but given the employment revisions the Bureau of Labor Statistics has made, showing 880,000 fewer jobs over the last year than actually the BLS thought, that the Fed has been slowing the economy too much. There's not, in my view, a great danger of a recession, but nevertheless, the Fed does have to seriously reduce interest rates. And those high interest rates have been a very great hardship on many people, lower income people, who have to pay more in credit card fees, and indirectly through mortgage rates, their rents have gone up. They also have to pay more for auto loans. And so the Fed reducing the prime rate is going to be helpful in many, many ways to many, many people.
What percentage do we know? What do you think?
Well, from 5.3, I think it's going to be a full 0.5%. Now, that may not sound like much, but to the market, it signals a lot. And I think the Fed will continue to lower rates.
And that'll be helpful to Kamala Harris, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and the Trumpers will gripe, and Trump will gripe that the Fed is playing politics. But actually, it's Trump who's playing politics. He's the one who's proposing in his administration to find ways of controlling or having a seat at the Fed table. That would be a huge mistake. The Fed's credibility depends on it being independent of politics.
Yep.
And Jerome Powell, like previous Fed chairs, have done their work, their responsible work to keep the Fed out of politics.
Right, right. One thing that was so fun for me is watching the DNC and listening to it in the car, depending, was thinking back to the RNC, which I couldn't even remember, frankly, and thinking how unprofessional it was compared to what we saw at the DNC. I mean,
it was also negative. It was just negative. Testosterone.
It was just Bush League minus the Bushes. I mean, it was just not, this was just so joy-filled, but also substance-filled and patriotism-filled and so well-produced. I mean, I love being able to compare the two in my head.
The Republican, again, remember, the Republican Party is a cult. It's a cult around Trump. And so the Republican National Committee and the Republican Conference and the get-together is nothing but a rally for Trump. That's all it was. And the Democratic convention really is about people, about families, about freedom, reproductive freedom, about all of the issues that people care about.
Right. Do you remember Trump? Oh, I found a check in my pocket. I mean, I'm just thinking the things I could remember that I've blocked out most of it from the RNC were just like, did that really happen? I mean, incredible. Okay. So, the other thing, this was fun. I forgot. So this week, I know this, but other people don't know it. So I'm going to share it, which is that you get a lot of direct messages on Instagram and Twitter from people and you liaise with people, obviously. But so Mina Harris, who is Kamala Harris's niece, you and she have written back and forth a couple times, and then she sent you this week and said, "Look what I found in my camera roll," and it was.
That's right. Let's share it with everybody out there because it's a photo taken, I think in probably 2008 at the Democratic convention that nominated Barack Obama. And Kamala was there, and we had a lovely time together. But it does remind me, she has been in and around politics for many years. She's done her homework. At that time, she was running for, I think it was Attorney General of California. And she has, through competence and I think just true grit, she continues to make a political power rise for herself. And she doesn't talk about being a person of color. She doesn't talk about being a woman. And she doesn't need to, not only because it's obvious, but also because her strengths are so overwhelming
Yep.
to anybody who has met her.
Right. I noted that too. But also everyone else did it for her at the DNC. So she didn't have to talk about glass ceilings. I mean, that's my point about the programming. It was just like, it was really teed up for her to be exactly what we needed her to be, which was the strongest candidate for the president of the United States that we have right now.
Exactly. And so the next question is, where are the Democrats going in the future? And we'll get to that, Heather, next week.
Let's do it
particularly
again.
In terms,
Let's do this again in about a week.
Let's do this again in about a week. Everybody out there, thank you for joining us. Hope you had fun at the convention, watching the convention. But the work is just beginning now. This is going to be, don't let anybody persuade you any otherwise. This is going to be a very tough election. It's going to be a very tough fight. And it is really a fight for the most basic values in America, having to do with freedom, having to do with family, but most of all, having to do with the future of our democracy. Thank you, Heather. Thank you. See you next week.